What's up, everybody? So, today we're going to be jumping right into episode two on how to bring a beat from beginning idea right to the end. If you guys haven't watched episode one, please do so. I'll leave a link somewhere. Yeah, for episode two, we're going to jump right into composition, arrangement. We're going to do counter melodies, we're going to do ear candy, and we're also going to start talking about mixing and automation. So, I hope you guys are ready. It's a lot of information, but we're going to move through it quite quickly. So, just for um, a little refresh of what we started on the last one. We've pretty much started with a melody and kit selection on top of a music bed of chords, right? Obviously. So let me play a little bit for you guys, and I hope you enjoy. We'll see you soon. Right? So that's sounding pretty good. Just a little refresher. What did we do in the last song? Or sorry, in the last episode, we had a simple melody that I performed here on the keyboards, locked into the key of D minor, and we brushed on that. So again, if you guys haven't watched episode one, definitely do so. It's the same drum pattern, it's the same melody, and we just started to work on composition. So the idea behind the composition for me, I knew that the one part it's not enough, and I wanted to change it, and I wanted to favor a little bit more into the major chords that belong inside of D minor. So again, if you guys followed episode one, you would remember this chord chart. I'll put it up somewhere. Take a look at that, because a lot of these chords are going to be familiar if you follow that kind of the Roman numeral method. And again, if you don't, that's fine. We've locked into a key. We've covered all that into episode one. Yeah. So essentially, we are using one sec. We are using the same melody. So here you go. Right? And then we've got the same drum pattern. But there's a lot more going on. So first of all, we were talking about the new kit pack from ADSR. I believe it's called Lo-Fire, and I have to say it's very good. So if you guys are just looking for new samples or anything, check it out, because it's definitely worth your time. So I'm using some loops, which normally I'm not using a ton of loops, but I have to say for this song, it really did fit well, and especially for the genre of lo-fi. You want some kind of jazz chords. You want to favor those major notes a little bit. So what did I add on top of it? I've added an instrument loop that comes from the ADSR kit. Sounds like this. And that's a really good loop. So that caught my attention right away. So essentially what I've done in the melody, I'm more favoring the D minor scale, and I'm favoring the D minor notes, obviously. And then you could call this a chorus. I could hear a chorus on there. But essentially, I want you guys to look at this production as, part A, part B, and the intro is going to, revolve around those two parts. Yeah, so that's my idea of composition. Let me shrink that down a little bit. So what I've done here in the middle is just created a stop glitchy a little bit, and then bam, right back into it. Excuse me. Which I think is a really good concept for this song. And I'd like to make a quick shout out to Splice, of course, because if you guys aren't familiar with Splice, definitely become familiar with it. It's amazing. When I'm looking for a certain sound or a certain vibe of a drum kit, and maybe I just need a hi hat or maybe I need a snare, I can always count on Splice to just go in. They have a beautiful menu that you can just sort through, and you'll find your sound right away. But remember, you guys got to get into time stretching. You also have to figure out how to change those keys, right? So just remember from episode 1, we're locked into D minor. So we're going to use D minor for this song. So I'd like to give a shout out to Bedroom Beats Lo-Fi, because I use one thing called In the Evening, which is a pretty cool name. Also caught my attention. And I've used something from, sorry, I'm just checking my notes. I used something from Trap Soul Vocals. So that's these guys down here. Just let me solo those. Like, that's a really good vocal chop. It's rhythmic, you know? You can already hear a beat inside it without the music. So that's what I chose it, just to reinforce our beat. Right? Little drop, which we're using our original melody on that. So for composition, that's essentially what we're working with. Right? So those are our effects that we're essentially going to be working with today. And we're also going to be covering composition, arrangement, and counter melody, ear candy, which is obviously those are the ear candies there. And we'll start talking about mixing and automation, because if you guys are wanting to learn how to package a beat or even how to create a beat professionally to sell to an artist or sell to a label, these videos should surely help you, and I hope you enjoy them. So at this point, if you guys do enjoy this, please like and subscribe. Ring that bell notification if you'd like to know when the videos come out. So one more time before we get into it, we'll just play it as one. You always need a riser, guys, to bring people back into it. All right, so that's enough about the loops that I'm using. I also performed some things, so I'll just put those on and let you hear those as well. So I've made 2 guitar parts. And this is where the counter melody is going to come into play, right? They're playing off each other. And if you notice, guys, please wear headphones for this, because you'll notice you're hearing the same sound as I do. See, they'll start playing off each other. So that also falls into the ear candy, right? And counter melodies, counter rhythms. There's a lot of things you can do. Definitely don't shy away from using pans, like left and right. Wow, you can really create this feeling and this atmosphere that gets you out of the box if you're producing inside your machine. So I suppose that pretty much covers the arrangement and composition of it. So we can get it. Oh, also the counter melody and ear candy. So we can jump right into mixing on this. So notice I have something on my main mix bus out, okay? Normally I would advise against that if you're trying to get your mix, your first general mix. Don't put something on the bus like I have. I have that there in case I'm playing an instrument right now live. I don't want to burst your ears. So that's just essentially a limiter that I'm using right now. So for mixing, how do you get started in that? You can make it as simple or as in depth of a mixing as you want, you know. But the main things to cover is definitely when you're doing a general mix, you want everything to be sitting at a healthy balance, so you have room to start building like maybe a sub bus mix, or maybe you want to run it into a mastering program. You need headroom, guys. So if you notice my levels here, I've already made a general mix. So let's turn this guy off. My mic might get a little low for a second. Notice where I'm coming in here, right? That's a little hot. So what I would advise you guys, once you make your general mix, simply grab all your channels and you can highlight them and bring them down. You know, bring them down, but for the sake of my tutorial here, I know where they are and I know what I'm doing in my master bus to keep them in order. And what am I using on my master bus? Well, CLA, of course. This is such a great plugin, guys. If you don't know it, you see I'm coming in a little bit hot. But for the sake of this, I want my mic and everything to be good levels for you guys. So if you can come out of your main bus in your first mix around -6, just let me show you guys. See, just bring it down a little bit, and you're gonna have a lot of headroom. So that's your first thing. So definitely do a general mix. Make sure that all your tracks together, because they're all building energy, you want them around -6 in your master bus. Again, I know how to use this plugin and I know what's involved inside that plugin. So I'm kind of using it as a glimpse into the future of mastering. So I like to look at that as it's not a master, you know, so don't get confused with that because it's on the master bus. This is not a master. We're going to get into that in episode 3. And that's going to be a really good episode, guys, for you guys. So essentially, you want your general mix. Start finding that mix, go through all your channels, make sure, you know, and don't be afraid to bring it down to -8, -9 per instrument, and then start your general mix, because the more headroom you have and you send it to your artist or you send it to another mixing engineer or a mastering engineer, they will thank you for staying around -6, because then they can do their job professionally. So again, so that's essentially covering the general mix. But when you're doing your mix, like your first mix, you need to think about your panning too. Because if you're running everything up the middle, you're going to start getting muddy and it's going to happen very fast. So, how do you do that? Depends on how you want to look at your mix. If you want to look at it as if you're a DJ and the audience is in front of you, you can look at it that way too, right? So, your left is left and right is right. I prefer to look at the mix as if I'm in the audience and I'm looking at the band and I can start to imagine where are the players, right? I like to keep my bass on the left and I'm looking at my drums directly. So the snare should be a little bit on the right, as would the hi hat, my right, right? So it depends on, you know, first decide that where do you want to look at your mix from? You know, this is a highly debated question, but it's totally personal. I prefer to be from the audience and imagining I'm looking at the band and I can see them, you know, moving around, and you can start creating a lot of things, which brings us into automation. Automation is very important, especially for feeling, just to get this impact when a riser comes. If the riser's coming and it's just going to hit at the same level as everything else, you're not going to feel it. So that means the part before should be a little bit lower, and you're starting to build this with automation. So here on Studio One, I have my automation track. You can see here with the main melody instrument, right? With the main rhythm instrument of the keys from the new um, low-fire pack. So you can see that I'm just bumping up the automation and I'm coming back down. I'm creating this wave, which would essentially be like a producer is right there with you, and he's just riding that. That's all he's doing. He's just bringing the emotion up and back down, and that also creates a lot of headroom. So that's what I'm running for automation on the main parts. And I'd like to talk really quickly about bass. So for me, what I've done is I've created this bass track, and I'm using the Rickenbacker bass from Native Instruments. It's amazing. Like what I'm running on is a pure neck DI, so it's as if a bass player is here and they've plugged in, and that's it. So I got the sound directly from their guitar, which I can bring into mixing. So what have I done with that? I've opened up. Let's find the channel. So I'm here. I'm running it directly to the pod farm, which is amazing for for DIs and for guitar, for bass. Even they have some pretty cool vocal stuff, but let's just stick with the bass. So what does that mean? After my DI signal, I'm running the bass directly into a full suite that's made for basses, right? So let's just take a listen to the bass. One moment. Sorry, guys, I'm running my mic through this, so I have to go back and forth a little bit. So I've performed this on my MIDI keyboard in the key of D minor. But you notice that there's emotion built into that. It's still dry, for me, I'm still going to work on this before I package, because the packaging is going to come up in episode 3. So I know I'm building into something, and what do I need? So for here, I'd like to just talk about one thing that's amazing, and it's called Bass Rider from Waves Audio. I'm a big Waves user, and I do know the plugins are expensive, but you can find Waves go on sale quite often. This is something that I use in most of my mixes. So I have a vocal rider and I have a bass rider. So what do? Essentially, you got a target audio that's coming in, and you want to balance your target with that. And it will take over, again, going back to the old school way of ducking audio and having a human feel into it. This VST is amazing if you've set it up correctly. So here, just let me bring that back up. I'll show you. So let's take a look at what it's doing. See? So it's riding it within the energy. So when you're using a plugin, something like this, you need to make sure, for one, that you're hitting the target. And you can set this manually, which, I've been mixing for quite a long time. So I know where I want my bass, where do I want that energy to come from, which for me is much better than just using an EQ, knocking off a bunch of frequencies. And, then what are you left with after that? So I prefer to, rather than cutting everything, especially when you're packaging stuff for someone else, because once you cut those frequencies, they're gone. When you package it up, people can try to boost it. They'll never get that original sound. So it's nice to leave a little bit of room for the next engineer to decide where does that bass fit in the mix after the vocals come in. And also, it also does something else, because we were talking about automation, right? So Bass Rider, essentially when I'm playing this, it's writing the automation, right? It's riding it for right now. And then all you have to do is turn on your automation, put it to read, and what it'll do, or sorry, put it to write. And what it will do is just write that automation so that you don't have to use your CPU power on a plugin afterwards. So that's the basics of, yeah, once you got your general mix, you definitely want to start looking at panning, and then of course compression and EQ. So these are the big things to look at, and they deserve their own tutorials on their own. So if you guys aren't familiar with compression, compression is essentially taking the lowest range, your lowest volume range and your highest volume range, and trying to find a happy medium for that to live in. So you can look at your EQ as having a sock drawer. The more socks you put in that drawer, you're not going to fit any more in there. So mixing is the same thing. Once you start putting a bunch of different instruments in and you're not giving them space to live there, you're going to run into problems very quickly. So panning and your general mix is the most important. Yeah, it's the most important in the mixing stage for me anyways. It's personal, guys. I think that you can do a lot with panning and volume and compression and EQ. You don't need to be going crazy with that, especially when you're packaging this up and sending it to someone else. So for an example of that, let's take a look at this guy. So this is our main instrument line, right? We've got that piano. I found that it was taking up way too much space. So the first thing I've done, see, so this is without any compression. It's taking up way too much space. So all I'm doing is running a subtle compressor here. CLA2A, again from Waves. I'm knocking off about 3 dBs, which is a lot. Like I'm pushing it quite hard as well. So I'm taking the lowest and the highest, and I'm putting them down, but still at a healthy level. And that on top of the rest of the automation is working quite nicely for this mix. And for EQ, like now what I would do is start going through every instrument on its own and trying to find a nice healthy place for that. So obviously this will bring into color coding. So when I'm color coding a track, I make sure that all my low frequencies, they're red, because I know that those tracks that I see, I have to target those EQs differently than I would the yellow tracks. And just staying organized in general. So for the yellow, that's all my mids, everything that lives in the mid frequency range. And for my sound effects and vocals, I normally keep them in the same type of range because they're all more in the higher frequency range. So I would label them white. I haven't finished all that, obviously. So these guys, you know what? Just for the sake of this, we will color code these red as well. Yeah. So the dark red is just going to be my sound effects. So essentially for mixing, for basic mixing, that's what you have to think about. You have to think about gain staging, which is the first thing you got to do. You got to start putting things in compartments of frequencies, and then you can go in and target those frequencies once you have the vocals or once you're ready to package it, which we're going to get into in episode 3. So if you guys are interested in fully mixing a beat, and also packaging, getting the packaging ready to sell, which is, you know, it's not such a simple task. You have to mix and master at different stages, and you have to also start getting in your audio tag, which we'll talk about as well in episode 3. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I will let you guys listen to the song on the way out, and we'll talk to you soon. Episode 3 is coming soon, next Monday. See you then, guys. That's called movement. Yeah, that's moving. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. If you found some knowledge there, please like and subscribe and join the Jaw Recording family. Talk to you soon.